Konnichiwa! Welcome to my personal channel, which, yes, its name is Zephram Graholski, but here on the channel you will be referring to me as Graholski-sensei, and I'm not going to be opening it very often, but please refer to me as that if you guys are going to be doing this, because this is the Japanese video. Oh, the first one. What joy. If you guys are ready to learn Japanese, then definitely stick around, because honestly, this series is going to be a lot of fun. Primarily, this is mostly for me to help me learn Japanese a little bit better, as well as to practice my teaching for when I eventually move to Japan to actually teach English. So, yeah, this is going to be fun. But before we actually get into the video, I'd quickly like to explain a few things that you are going to need for this course. Now, what course would be complete without a textbook? You don't actually need this if you don't want it. We will be using it as we are actually learning. But you won't if you're just going through the course just watching the videos, then you will learn everything that is actually in this book, as well as a lot of things that are in other books that I will also be using. But we will be using this as one of our main focuses to actually learn about kanji. So yes. Now, as for other things that you will actually be needing, and you should actually have these, if you can print these out, please do, because they will actually help you out a lot. However, you can just use these, well, you can use the first one, just put it on your phone and just have it ready, because it will be very important, and that is the Hiragana and Katakana alphabet. This specific one that I will be linking in the description below is actually from Japanese 101. So if you guys are actually interested to learn all of the Hiragana and Katakana, they are also a good source. But this is basically what we will be using to actually teach you guys how to spell. And yeah, this is a good thing to just have on hand in case you ever have issues. Especially early on. Once you've actually learned the alphabet really well, then I'd say you won't need it, but it will be very helpful. The other thing that I've also put in the description below, well, actually, I think both of these are going to be in a folder on Dropbox, probably. I don't know. I'll see. I'll see exactly what I'm going to do, but it could be Dropbox. It might be something else, but more than likely it will be Dropbox, is this sheet, which I know you can't see it very well, but you're going to be seeing this a lot in these videos. Basically, this is, I better make sure that I actually say it properly, but this is Genko Yoshi, which is basically just paper for writing, Japanese. It's actually well laid out, so you can actually write it so you can write it vertically. So, and we'll be using this quite a lot, and this is how we're actually going to be practicing all of our Japanese, as it's a lot better to use this than it is to use an actual notebook. If you don't feel like printing it out, or you just don't have a printer, then you can obviously use just a textbook. I do not actually recommend using a computer, though, because of the fact there's actually a lot of changes, and also computers don't really help you learn how to write these things out. So yeah, I do suggest that you at least get a notebook and at least practice. Now, if you are going to be practicing using an actual notebook, I do not actually recommend writing from right to left horizontally, and then going down. I actually do recommend that you turn it on its side and then start writing the way that Japanese write it, just so you can get in the habit of it. You're not necessarily going to be required to do this in every single setting, but it is good practice for if you actually do decide to take the course, or you decide take an actual course in Japanese, or you decide to do something else. But anyways, let's head over to the actual desk to learn how to actually write hiragana, and that is going to be our first lesson, and then tomorrow you will get to learn katakana. And yeah, so let's head over there, and welcome back. So like I said, you're going to want to have your paper ready so that you can actually write everything. Here I have the chart just ready, so if you guys want to learn some things as well as to also know basically if I'm doing something wrong, usually this is right, but there are a few exceptions. So let's actually begin with our first syllable, which is, of course, ah. When you first are writing ah, you are going to make two lines, kind of like a cross. This will allow you to, this is your basic starting point. And from there, you are then going to come over here and draw a little loop, just like that. And that is your first syllable. A few things to actually keep in mind with this is the fact that with this whole system, instead of using the alphabetical way that we use in a lot of European countries, instead with Hiragana, we use the syllable system. Or with Japanese, we use the syllable system, which is very different. So obviously, first off, we have a, I, U, E, O, which we're going to start with. And then we have ka, ki, ku, ke, ko, so on and so forth. And basically, that's one of the big reasons why I wanted you guys to get this, as, like I said, it's really helpful to actually learn the alphabet, or the syllable bet, I guess. And by using this, you'll actually be able to learn very easily how things work in the syllables. And if you make a few little mistakes, don't worry too much about it. But I do suggest that once you actually have seen this video, you practice each and every single syllable multiple times until you absolutely think that you have it right. So next up is, of course, E, which is, when using a lot of things, then you'll use the I, and it's a very simple 2 strokes with a little hook at the end of the first one, and then just a straight smaller line curving on the other one. Next up, we have U, which I kind of screw up a lot because I usually do it like this, but more accurately, you're supposed to do it like this, making sure that there is a curve. If you do make some mistakes here and there, they're not going to necessarily be really confused about it. There's no real difference and a thing that looks exactly like ooh, but it's a different thing. Not even in kanji, as far as I'm aware. So if you do either of these, you'll still be okay. Next up is E, which is also 2 strokes. A lot of these are actually 2 strokes, surprisingly. But it's a line, and then it's a Z with a little bit of a hump, and then going out. So there you have that. And then finally, in the normal syllables, we have O, which is very similar to A, except for the fact that, unlike A, when you're coming down, you will continue the motion to actually make the rest of the loop, and then you will make your third stroke, which is just like that. And those are your first 5 syllables. So, yeah. Next up is, of course, the ka, ki, ku, ke, ko, which is also our first syllable that will start to use something else. Something that you may notice when looking at the alphabet chart is the fact that there are some sounds that are not that just don't exist on this chart for some reason. Specifically, the G's, which are actually going to be going with the K's, except for when you do the K's, instead you are going to add 2 little dendens, as I call them, to basically make sure that you are saying that this is a, for example, ka instead of, it's ga instead of ka. So let's actually start with, of course, we are going to use ka, which is just 3 simple strokes, just like that. And if we want to write ga, we are going to, again, make those strokes exactly the same, but at the end, we are going to add 2 little lines right here. And this is basically how things are going to work with all of these different words that have these different meanings, or these syllables that mean different things. So, like I said, ga, ki, ku, ke, ko are connected to ka, ki, ku, ke, ko. And basically with each of these, you will just add 2 little dendens at the end. So let's move on to ki, which is our first syllable and one of 3 syllables that on the chart is actually used differently than how you would actually do it. So first off, you make these 2 little lines, then you draw your line, you hook it, and then you come off of the page once again, and we make that little loop, and that will be your ki. Now you may notice that it is different from that of ki on the chart. This is because of the fact that 3 syllables actually have slight differences between how you spell them in when you're just writing them and how you would write them if you are typing. So this ki is what you will see when you are typing or you are texting or whatever. Not really certain why. And the other 2 are sa and ri. So again, then the next syllable is that of gi, which again, you just add the 2 little dendens. Next up is ku, which fairly simple. It's one of only a few that actually only have 1 stroke in the entire thing. And it's probably one of my favorites. Now, this is actually kind of an interesting thing. I usually like to put the 2 dendens coming right off the hook, but usually when you're typing it, you'll see that for gu, it will actually put the dendens right there. There's actually one other example of this happening, and that is in te, when it becomes de. Oftentimes they will put the dendens in a different location, and I'll go over that in just a bit. And I'm sorry, I just realized that the page wasn't up right. Alright. Next up is ke, which again, line with a hook, then line and boop, and there you go. And again, with ge, make the exact same thing, but add the 2 little dendens. And finally, for the k's and the go's, is ko, which first stroke has a hook, second stroke is just like that. And then, if you want to write go, you make the 2 same strokes and the dendens right there. And there we go. And those are the K's. Oh, now let's go back up to the top to start on our saws. The S's. So again, like I said before, sa is a little bit different than its writing on the actual chart, as instead of having the single loop, you do this with the hook, and boom. Now, you might expect, and you would be right, that saws have zas, which are again just adding the little dendens to the end. Right there. And there you go. Now that you guys actually know that, I'm only going to be going over them with the beginning ones, so we can actually get through this quicker. And I'm also not going to be going over a few changes that will happen with sounds and the likes until we actually finish up this, until a future lesson, because that is more equated to actual language. So next up we have she, which is the only part of the S that has a different change. It's also important to note that she is very, very special. Oh, and also the only way to write she, the SH sound in any other language. It's kind of complicated, and I don't want to get into all of that right now. But yep, there's she, which still becomes Z, which is interesting, in my opinion. Next up is su, which is just 2 strokes with a little loop right there, and boop. And then obviously it becomes z when you are making when you add the dendens. Next up is se, which is a straight line like that, and a line with a hook, which again becomes ze when you add the dendens, which is also what my name starts with. And we'll be going over that in the lesson after the next one. So, yeah. Next up is so, which is just like so. 1 stroke, which can be a little bit challenging to do, but it's still a very fun one, and it's kind of important to notice this one because of the fact that there are actually 3 frickin' syllables that are very similar to each other. First off is so, but ru and ro are also very similar, except for the fact that so has this loop going to the right, while both ru and ro have it going to the left. So, yeah. Next up is the tas. So, ta chi tsu te to, which, yes, that is very confusing. Probably the most confusing of all of these. And ta is just 4 simple strokes. Probably one of the easiest. And, of course, becomes da when you add the dendens. This is actually one of the reason I bring this one up specifically is because of the fact that de is one of the most used frickin' ones that there is going to be. And yeah, it's most used one that is used with syllables and with the dendens. So yeah. So next up is, of course, chi, which still becomes frickin' d. I don't understand why, but yeah. Like I said, it becomes it's currently chi and becomes d when given the dendens. Actually, a very rare one to actually be using. I don't actually know very many that actually do use it. And then we have tsu. Very common one, and also one of the first ones that will be very often shrunken down, and we will explain that in a future lesson. So again, becomes de when you are doing that. Next up is te, which is just 1 stroke, very simple, and very fun to use. So there you go. And finally, we have to, which is just like that. Now, the important, I actually do want to bring up one last thing before we actually move on. With other syllables, what you will often see is if something is not necessarily supposed to have a vowel in that place. So, for example, my name, Zephram, is spelled Zefuramu, which all of those are connected to the u's. But with the t's, since su is special, you will actually use to instead. So we'll get to that when we actually are teaching you how to spell your name. Next up are the ends, which start off with na, which are 4 simple strokes. This is the first one that is a consonant that does not actually have a change, and only 1 of 3, or I guess 4, 5, kind of. It's complicated. So yeah, na, which then there is ni, very common one. Nu, which is start with that, and then wapow, probably the most complicated of the 2 strokes. With then ne, which I think I might be doing this wrong. but I believe that it is like this. I think I am actually wrong, because I believe that it's actually one line and then boop, boop, badoop. Yeah, that's the actual way. So, that is the actual correct way, but you might see that it's a bit hard to tell on the chart. And finally, we have no, which is one of the most common, well, not one of the most, one of the pretty high up there ones that you're going to be using, because that is a very common particle. The only one that's probably used more is our next syllable, which is ha, which is just a simple boop, boop, and boop. When this is a particle, though, it is actually pronounced wa, such as in watashi wa. The first wa is actually using the actual one that specifically looks like it's going to be wa, and then there's this one, which is in the later wa. But on top of that, we also actually have to learn two other things when we're coming into the ha's, because, like I said, this one has the den-dens and becomes ba. But there's a third way of reading these, which is pa. Basically, when you add this little circle to any of the H's, then it becomes pa, or pa, pi, pu, pe, po. And these ones are very important to remember. I'm not going to be doing them with each of them, but that's basically how you would write the pa sound. Next up is, of course, hi, which again becomes either be or I guess b or p, depending on what you use, whether it's the den-dens or the circle. Next up is fu, which is still becomes bu or pu, but it's weird. And it's just like that. A bit complicated again, but yeah. Fu is actually a little bit special. As you notice, it sounds like a F, and we will actually explain that in the naming stuff. But there are a few different things that you can use with that, and I will, like I said, I will explain that when we get to it. Next up is the fun one, hey, which is the only freaking syllable that is the same whether you are writing it in hiragana or katakana. It's just that easy. Next up is ho, and 4 strokes. Again, make sure you do the hook, 2 lines, and that is also ma, which we are about to get into. Alright, we're finally in the home stretch, with no more frickin' sound changes, luckily. But let's get started with ma, which is simply 2 strokes like that, and then a little hook, as such. Next up is mi, which again, 2 strokes. And I'm actually going to get rid of that chart so that you guys can see a little bit better, and now you just can't see that anyways, so yeah. Next up is, of course, mu, which is a little bit complicated. So obviously you start with the first stroke, but then you go loop, and it looks like it's going to become just like su, but then it goes like that, and then get another line. Yeah, this one's annoying. And then we have me, which is very similar to nu, except for the fact that, unlike nu, it does not do the loop. So, yeah, you have me. And I'm just, yeah, making that better. And finally, we have mo, which is just, it's basically she, but it has 2 extra lines. And now we get into the ones that only have 3. First off, we have ya, which is a very simple boop, boop, and boop. These ones are also important because they are actually sound changers. By adding them into the different E's, you will actually be able to make it sound like it's a different word. So, for example, ki can become kya. Or in terms of the last one, it becomes kyo, like in Kyoto. So, yeah. This is also how you get Tokyo. So, yeah. Next up is you, which is just like so. Oh, fudge. I guess I was a little bit off center. So, there is you. And finally, we have yo, which, just like that. And like I said, we will be going over how to make these small in a future video, and I will explain all of that. Next up, since we are running out of... yeah, we can probably get these last 5 in here. It's going to be a bit tricky, but we can do it. Next up, the rarirurero. These ones are a bit tricky with speaking because the fact that these are technically not exactly R's and they're not exactly L's. So, rarirurero, if you've spoken Spanish, it's actually really helpful to actually think of these more like rolling your R's than... especially if you're not necessarily very good at it. So we have ra, then we have ri, which is our third and final one that is different from its other spelling, which is just a hook and then a little line. And then we have ru, which is just similar to so, but it's going to the left with a loop at the end. And next up, we have re, which is very similar to ne. So first do that, then this, and sh. Again, it's very similar, except that it doesn't have the loop. It has the little off the end. And finally, we have ro, which is just like ru, except for it does not have the loop at the end. And now for our last 3. These ones are a bit weird. So first off, we have wa, line, and whoop. Again, similar to both re and ne, except for line goes that way instead. So, wa is actually pretty important. Like I said, this is what we would this is what you say at the beginning of watashi wa. And then we have o. And no, I did not say that wrong. This is o. This is only used when you are specifically trying to, using it as a particle. Usually this connects verbs and nouns, I believe. No, it's complicated. I'll get into it when we actually get to this stuff, but I'm forgetting the exact details about it right now. But o, very important. And the other one in katakana that we will be going over in the next video is useless. So, yeah. And finally, we have n. Yeah, it's n. This is the only one that does not actually have a, I, U, E, O somewhere in the word, or somewhere in the syllable. This is a very special one that is usually put at the end of sentences, or at the end of words. It is used in certain cases, and we will be going over that eventually. But this one thing that you may notice is that this is very far away from the nani nu ne no over here. So this is, if you ever have this in a if you're ever looking for syllable order, remember this goes at the end. So yeah. But that's pretty much it. Again, please make sure to grab your own charts and practice these. I would suggest writing at least 10 of these a day until you think that you actually have it. And yeah. But anyways, guys, that is the hiragana list. We will be moving on to katakana in the next video. But on!